So, is the MSRP just flat out lie? Yeah, that's a loaded question, but it's one a lot of people are asking, especially now that GPU prices are all over the place. Some cards launch at one price and then 2 weeks later it's either out of stock, marked up, or mysteriously limited edition. So let's talk about what MSRP really means today, because in 2025 it's not just about what the manufacturer says, it's about whether you can actually buy the card at that price, and that's where things get really messy. Today, we are breaking down how realistic the MSRP actually is, especially for cards like the RX 9070 XT, the RTX 5080, and yes, of course, even the RTX 5090. Let's start from the top. When AMD launched the RX 9070 XT, they said the MSRP was $600. Sounds reasonable, right? But behind the scenes, we now know the number was optimistic at best. According to multiple sources, the real internal target was closer to $650, maybe even $700. Some even say AMD was ready to announce it at $700 at CES, but pulled back probably to stay competitive. So what we got instead was a marketing MSRP, a number that looks great in headlines but doesn't actually reflect what most people pay. Now, technically, if some units were sold at $600 mark, even for a few days, does that mean they didn't lie? Maybe, but let's be real, if only a small group of people got that price and the rest had to pay a premium for months, that's not really honest either. It's what I would call technically true, but functionality misleading. Here's the thing, even if AMD wanted to sell RX 9070 XT at $600, there are layers in the supply chain that can change everything. Let's say AMD ships a decent number of cards, cool, but if the demand is still higher than the supply, that's when prices start to shift. And it's not always AMD's fault. In fact, it's usually not. A lot of time it's the distributions, the middleman between AMD and the retailers who raise the prices, and once that happens, there's no going back. Retailers aren't going to eat that cost, so what you get is GPU that was supposed to be $600 selling for $750 or even more. Now, this isn't new. It happens in previous generation too, but it's getting worse year by year. For example, board partners told us that they are selling every single 9070 XT they can make it because the demand is so high, they're just charging more, and they're openly admitted it. It's classic supply and demand economy, and while we would love to live in the world where every GPU stays on the shelves at MSRP, the reality is as long as everyone wants it, someone's going to raise the price. That's the game, that's the economy. Let's say this. A GPU like RX 9070 XT launched at $600, but you couldn't actually find it at the price for the first few months. Is that a lie? Well, maybe not a full lie, but definitely misleading, and here's why. If AMD ramps up production later in the year and supply finally meets demand, prices might back down. So if, let's say, the card spends 6 months above MSRP and then in the next 6 months at the below MSRP, the average ends up kind of reasonable. But by that point, most early adopters already paid more, and most reviews, most YouTube videos, most headlines, they were all created during that first wave, so the damage is already done. That's why the MSRP conversation is so tricky. You can't just judge it after 2 months or even 3. You need to see what happens across the entire life cycle of the product, and usually around a year or 12 months or even longer. But of course, no one wants to wait that long. We judge GPU at the moment they launch, so if the MSRP isn't real at the launch, it almost doesn't matter when it comes real later. So, which cards have had the worst MSRP situation? Let's start with the RX 9070 XT from AMD. This one has been consistently hard to find at $600, and even though AMD may have wanted to hit that price, the board partners and distributors clearly didn't get the memo. They have been charging more from day one because they could. Then there's the RTX 5080, it's slowly getting better, but in most regions it's still well above MSRP, especially early on. It was nearly possible to get, and when it showed up, it came with markup. But the RTX 5090 is arguably the worst offender. Even now, months after launch, it's not just about MSRP. It's barely even available. It's expensive, scarce, and for most people, not even an option. These are the cards that really break the MSRP promise, not just for a week or two, but for months, multiple after launch. So, if you're someone trying to build a PC today and you see these prices tags, the MSRP feels more like wishful thinking than reality. Now, to be fair, not every GPU is missing its MSRP. The RTX 5070 has been widely available at $550 in many regions, and while price vary depending on where you live, in general, it has been one of the most honest cards this generation when it comes to pricing. 5070 Ti had a bit of panic early on. In the US, it was seen going for $900 at launch, but now, in many international markets, it's come back, down closer to MSRP. As for 5060 series, those cards haven't had the same demand in the DI market, so they have been easier to find, availability is solid, pricing is stable. That said, there's a huge asterisk here. This all depends on the region. In the US, with current tariffs around 30%, hitting MSRP is almost impossible. So even if AMD or Nvidia set a fair price, by the time it hits shelves, it's just not feasible. Still, in many places around the world, the 5070 and 5060 are showing that MSRP can be real when market conditions cooperate. So yeah, is MSRP a lie? Not always, but for some of the biggest cards this generation, it's definitely been misleading. And while things are starting to improve, we have still got a long way to go before MSRP becomes something you can trust again. Let me know in the comment section what was the last GPU you bought at MSRP. Mine was RTX 4070 Ti supermodel. See you soon.